This is Aging Forward, a podcast from Mayo Clinic about the science behind healthy aging and longevity. Each episode, we explore new ways to take care of our long-term health, the health of our loved ones, and our community, so we can all live longer and better. I'm Dr. Christina Chen, a geriatrician and internist at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. In this episode, we are talking about lifestyle health, and today we have a guest with us who is a lifestyle coach about tips on fitness and nutrition for healthy aging. Matthew Arnold is a multi-talented athlete, health coach, business owner, and my personal trainer. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you for having me.
I'm usually used to seeing you in the gym with you giving me the crackdown and telling me that I'm not jumping high enough in my burpees or something and just suffering. But you're the perfect person for a show today, so I'm really glad you're
I really appreciate being here.
So Matt has been in fitness his entire life. He has been involved in sports and martial arts such as Taekwondo and Jiu-Jitsu. Mm-hmm. And in 2014, founded Detour Athletics, which is a functional fitness gym for people of all ages, sizes, shapes, and backgrounds. We all know that there are general benefits to health, fitness, nutrition, and healthy aging. But in 2020, only 15.3% of men and 10.8% of women aged 65 and older meet CDC guidelines for aerobic and muscle strengthening exercises. So that's concerning. You've worked with a lot of people, different age groups, throughout their exercise regimen. How does exercise look different as people age?
I think it becomes more purposeful. That's the best way to describe how training changes as we get older. When we're younger, we can kind of do anything, everything. We can push it really hard. We can bump up the intensity. We're going to benefit quite a bit because we're just young. We can recover quickly, right? But as we age, we start recognizing that we can't push this hard anymore. And so the intention of how you're training, why you're doing it, it changes dramatically. You know, a lot of my clients that were former athletes and high-level athletes, they no longer have that drive to go and crush themselves anymore. It's more of like, how do I just feel better?
I love this concept of purposefulness. Can you expand on that a little bit more? What do you mean by becoming more deliberate and purposeful with your exercise?
Well, I think we all identify ourselves with our younger versions of ourselves. I think we get very stuck. And so people tend to get lost in this aspect of what they used to be versus what they can be now, right? And so, for example, for myself, I used to be an athlete where I could go run a 6-minute mile for 11 miles or whatever, or compete at a high level in Taekwondo. But trying to have that mindset moving forward as I age to accommodate my current lifestyle and my future lifestyle is not going to be beneficial at all. And so it's trying to establish a new purpose of why am I doing this? I want to have more intention of what I'm doing and making sure that that intention is much more purposeful for my long-term goals. That's how I look at it for myself, and that's what I try to communicate with a lot of my clients. That's great that you have this specific goal. That's great that you want to lift this much like 5-10 years ago. But how about how you feel in 5 or 10 years? How about how you're going to function with your kids or your grandkids in 5 or 10 years? That to me is creating a new sense of purpose.
And having that new mindset in place, I think, is life-changing for them in a way where you're helping them shift their perspective a little bit to have that more purposeful goal setting. I feel like nowadays between strength training, resistance training, cardio, it's easy to get lost in all that as we're trying to help people meet their fitness purposefully. What do you feel like are the most important fitness principles for people, say, age 50 and above?
Keep it really simple. What I prescribe now is very much what we've been promoting for years. Move more, have some sort of structured strength training, and just create better habits. That has not changed. And so we need to stop overcomplicating what health and fitness is and just go back to the basics.
And the basics, would you say, is heavily emphasizing the strength training aspect of it? And can we talk a little bit more about strength training specifically? How does it benefit older adults?
Strength training should be, in my opinion, the priority for anyone aging. simply just because as we age, what happens? We start losing a lot of muscle mass.
Right.
And I think for you as a physician, you get to see that with your patients on a day-to-day basis. And the way I look at strength training is it creates freedom for your long-term life. And the stronger that we become, we are more resilient against injuries, creating stronger bones, more functionality. And then also just from a metabolic standpoint, you're able to keep your metabolism pretty high. Your body just feels better.
Right. So in my practice, I do see the long-term consequences of muscle wasting and sarcopenia, which is the general muscle shrinkage and loss of muscle mass over time. And often it just almost seems too late. Someone comes in looking pretty frail and they're feeling weak and they've already started falling. How often do you work with people who are frail and who just have very little muscle mass, who are perhaps more limited in their mobility and their strength? How do you approach that situation?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, one, communicating to them that they can do this.
Mm.
It doesn't matter if they're lifting only their body weight and they need assistance, or they're lifting a barbell. Like, I need to reinforce that they can do this, right? So it's more of a mindset right away. But two, it's just, meeting them where they're at, right? I want to be able to push them outside their comfort zone just to the point where it's beneficial for them, but not to the point where it's going to be negatively impacting them to injury or just their ego, whatever that might be. Everyone's going to be very different.
Goal setting, meeting them where they're at. Simplicity is what I'm hearing, because when they feel like they can do it, they feel more empowered that they can move on to the next level.
Exactly.
I love that. What are some misconceptions about exercise and aging that you often encounter, and how do you, dispel those myths?
I can't do it. That's the biggest one right there. There's a lot of individuals out there that are, number one, they were stubborn. My dad's stubborn. I know my father-in-law is stubborn. But it's just this concept that it's too late for them. And what's so cool about where we're at in our life, for us especially, and for the individuals that I get to work with, there's so much more growth. And that's what I'm trying to communicate constantly over and over and over. No, you can do this. And I'm going to show you how. And so once we get past that, it's just this is actually fun. And that's the thing. You have to try to make this kind of stuff fun.
Yeah. I feel like that attitude of I can't do this usually starts in the home setting, where there's just sort of sitting there and realizing that there's not much they can do. It's not until they get that encouragement either from a caretaker or someone like you, and then they try something new and they realize, oh, I can do it. I can get some of my function back. And then they feel like, all right, let's take it to the next step. For someone new to fitness later in life, such as in their 80s and 90s, where should they start?
I mean, honestly, they should just try to find some help, right? There's a lot of fitness centers that actually do cater to aging adults. They might be able to get a referral from their doctor, or just reaching out to a personal trainer to see, hey, can you help me? Because at our gym, we also have some 80-year-olds that are working out there with personal trainers, and they have had a lot of success.
Are there things that they can do in their home for people who are more homebound, they can't mobilize much? Sounds like any activity is better than no activity.
Yeah, I mean, really any activity. Again, they just need someone to show them different movements that they can do at their home. It might be just getting off the couch and doing that repeatedly 10 times. It might be just grabbing their arms and, number one, shadow pressing something, or it might be just nothing but going through the movement. Because at the end of the day, at that age, they just need to move, right? So someone just needs to be there to help them do this 3 times a day or whatever, and go from there.
Do you have a good example of a simple exercise for your clients over the age of 50? One that they can really benefit from and one that they can maintain and try to keep up with?
Everyone needs to be able to squat. Everyone needs to be able to deadlift or pick an object off the ground. And then everyone needs to be able to press, like pressing either their body weight off the floor or off the bed or something like overhead. So when you think of functional movements that they need to rely on from a day-to-day basis of being able to function with just their basic necessities of life, squatting to a chair, picking up an object from the floor, and then pressing themselves out of bed, or putting like a cup or a plate away in the cupboard, those are the simple ones.
That's really good practical advice. Let's move on to nutrition, because that's a huge part of musculoskeletal health, is getting the nutritional needs to support that. How do you work with your older adult clients when it comes to nutrition? You know, we tend to require more nutrients as we age because our bodies are becoming less efficient in absorbing and utilizing them. What advice have you found particularly helpful for nutritional optimization in older adults?
I think really reinforcing a balanced meal, balanced macronutrients, making sure that they have enough protein and good complex carbs, and then healthy amount of fat. That being said, again, you have to kind of meet them at the middle, right? And you have your individuals that like their specific fast foods or whatever. And so you can't just completely take that away. What I like to do is like, all right, I want you to have 1 or 2 extra servings of protein or fruit a day. Or, you know, at nighttime, I want you to stop eating this at this time and see how you feel the next day. Instead of completely flipping their script of what they typically eat, it's like adding a little bit, taking a little bit, and then gradually changing their complete meal plan over time.
So, sources of protein, that's been the bane of my existence. I feel like I've been just resorting to eggs, yogurt, edamame, and some beef jerky. Like, what's your go-to protein sources?
I tend to do a lot of lean animal meat. So obviously, you know, you have to vary it as much as possible. Like with protein, you can't just do like all vegan style or vegetarian style protein, right? Because that does not have the complexity of the branched chain amino acids that you want from animal. But at the same time, you have too much, just say pork belly for protein, right?
I know who likes that.
You know, that's going to carry too much fat. So you got to make sure you have a good balance of just a little bit of everything. That way you're not getting too bored, but also at the same time, I think it's just beneficial for you.
And is there a difference in nutritional need between what the body needs for a strength training day versus cardio day, or is it kind of all the same?
I think for most individuals, they can definitely keep it pretty simple from day to day to day.
Yeah.
There's definitely benefits if you decide, if you do have your strength training day, you're going to have a little bit more protein and slightly more carbs on a heavier conditioning cardio day. So there's definitely benefits with playing around with those numbers. But for most individuals, they just need to stick to the same plan day to day to day to see that consistency.
And in order to do that well, would you recommend something like meal planning? Because it sounds very cumbersome to do that.
Meal planning when you're in your 60s and 70s, who wants to do that, right? So I want to make sure the people that I work with usually have a set, here's my lunch or here's my dinner, and then fill everything else in between. So we call that the Tetris method. You have certain meals pre-planned, but it's not overly complicated. And then as long as you have that, then you can fit this fruit or this pack of peanuts in my meal for today or whatever. So that usually works the best, I think.
And are there any other strategies besides the Tetris strategy?
Another strategy a lot of people can utilize as well is just honestly focus on a protein intake, right? I just love reinforcing this over and over and over, but making sure like every single meal, you're always going to ensure that you have this much protein, and then you can kind of fill it in with everything else. I think that's a pretty successful strategy for a lot of individuals, especially that are going out to eat or going on vacation, is just make sure like, hey, like as long as I meet my protein intake, I'm good.
And how can people make sure their protein and their nutrients are balanced? Can you give me an example of a meal that has a good nutrition content and might be easy for someone to make, like a kind of a go-to meal prep strategy?
To make it really simple, for most individuals, they just need to have a palm size of protein, right? And then from there, make sure that they have like about a palm size or so of some sort of vegetables, and then a little bit of carbs, like a baked potato, for example. Something complex like that works really well. But as long as it's very balanced within the plate, that's the biggest component. A lot of times people will have a plate that's just full of one specific thing and then not enough of another.
And just because I've been tracking my meals, I know a palm-size piece of meat is about 4 ounces or so, about 25 to 28 grams of protein, depending on what type of meat. And so that makes up a good portion of your protein requirements for the day. And what's your take on supplements out there, multivitamins, other over-the-counter items that can maybe play a part in muscle health, joint health?
So to me, I think supplements are beneficial, but they're supplements. Most supplements give you what, like 5%, 10% of the food that you eat.
Sure.
So I think as long as your diet is fairly good, I think there's benefits with supplements, especially with multivitamins. I think fish oil, there's huge benefits obviously from that. And then obviously taking calcium, other little things like that we typically start lacking as we age.
Yeah. Aging, there's often a gradual loss of taste and sensation and smell, which can limit food choices for a lot of people, impacting the taste of things. Are there any workarounds that you've found around that? If food just doesn't taste good anymore? Add more salt. You can't do that.
Obviously not the salt, but like for me, for example, I love tacos. And I can make tacos fit my macros anytime, and I can make different variations of it. So like it's kind of playing around with that, or like making different types of stir fries, or making a different burrito bowl, or using different seasonings out there for a piece of chicken that you might use for, a quesadilla to like a salad, right? Changing up the seasoning to that, I think, is the biggest thing. But that's a hard one. That's a hard one to like try to adjust for. And that's why I think fast food is so good, because they're able to have all those fillers inside of their meals.
Right. I guess find a spice that you like. And
truly it is. Yeah. But what's funny is as I've aged, I'm recognizing there are certain foods I don't like anymore. A lot of vegetables.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do they just taste different now? Or
they taste different, and then my body sensitivity to certain foods are starting to definitely become more noticeable. And I think you probably see that pretty commonly in a lot of your patients, right? I used to love vegetables, and now there's like certain vegetables I just can't have anymore. Like a lot of peppers and cucumbers, I got to like kind of stay away from.
Wow.
So
you've developed a vegetable aversion.
Yeah, it is very interesting, that's for sure.
So chronic health issues is something that we see a lot. People develop arthritis, low energy, endurance. They struggle with obesity that's been maybe lifelong and really hard to exercise because it's easy to become breathless. So what's your advice for these situations where it's just hard for people to get started and maybe has been the source of poor motivation?
Again, it's creating that purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest issue people need to recognize is they need to believe in themselves to know that they can do this still. I love to like keep things really simple with people when they're in that state of mind. And so I like to just really reinforce, just start walking. Create some sort of support group. I think that's another big one. Everyone thinks that they have to do this alone when they could actually get a group of friends and, hey, let's start a challenge. Let's all of us start, walking 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day. You don't have to do this alone, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And then just believe that you can do this. And the more you're able to do that, then it's like, oh, I feel good. I'm emotionally happier again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something I've been trying to work on with encouraging my patients too, because in most situations, they don't really see anyone else except me, and when I have that quick touch point with them, how do I motivate them to help them realize that they can do this? They've struggled with, say, obesity for 30 years, and they feel like I've already done everything that I can. But if their doctor or their healthcare provider can just give them that little bit of encouragement where it's like, okay, I want you to go home for the next couple months, start a few weight training reps, come back, let me know how you feel because I feel like you can do this. And then setting those small goals to say, I'm going to try to walk up to a mile and let that be your homework for the next 3 months or whatever.
Yeah.
You come back, tell me how you did.
It's tough because I feel like once they leave your office, they don't know where to go. They're just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
My doctor just told me to start walking more again.
That's why I send them to you. I feel like we need more of you in this world, more lifestyle coaches, not just as a profession, but just a source of inspiration as either a friend or a family member. And not all of us can afford that. Mm-hmm. What would you say to an older person who wants to start improving their fitness and nutrition on their own, particularly if they're on a budget? And I know we mentioned a few things of just like getting going.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't have someone like you in their lives, what are some strategies they can do on their own?
If they're tech savvy, there's a lot of walking apps. And you can collaborate with your friends on this walking app that is free. And it's also like engaging with each other. You guys can communicate and make it a specific goal, a leaderboard.
Yeah.
So with
Oh,
your
that's
friends,
fun.
of like, hey, I can do this, right? And make it a competition. That's a super cheap option. The other thing too is like there's so many apps and fitness trackers and things like that that are out there that do connect us with other people. Honestly, the other thing too is like, on social media, like on Facebook, things like that, there's also a lot of like groups that are accommodating people that need to motivate each other quite a bit. So I think there's that as well. But I mean, you just got to find it.
Yeah. And get creative with it. A couple months ago, I had a patient come back to visit with me. And again, he was struggling with getting moving, and he wants to weight train, but has just never found that motivation or that push to do so. And so I have this 15-pound weight that I just keep on my floor and in my office. And I'm like, hold on one second. I went there, got my weight, and I gave it to him. And I put like a little bow tie around it. I'm like, here, this is my gift to you. You take this home, do some reps, and use it. And surprisingly, he started using it. It just gave him that incentive to, it's like, this is my doctor telling me that. And she gave me her personal weight, and it was like all ratty and gross. But I think we just have to find these little moments, to encourage our loved ones and people that we care about.
Yeah, and it's like not giving up on them.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I feel with a lot of the people that I work with. I see their potential. They don't see it yet. I see it, and I'm trying to communicate that quite a bit. And what's the best way to like have them hear you? You just have to like constantly reinforce like, hey, I believe you can do this.
Right.
And you have to start believing in yourself. You know how funny that is? Here's a 67-year-old, 80-year-old, and they've lived their entire life doing all the hard stuff, having kids, grandkids, whatever. And then all of a sudden we're kind of like going back, reestablishing this belief system that they forgot that they used to have for themselves. For my position, it's amazing to like see that there's still so much growth.
Yeah.
There's so much growth for these individuals to continue to become a better version of themselves, even if they don't see that yet.
Yeah. Love that. Do you have any success stories of that? Any stories to share of a client that you worked with who has been able to rediscover their health journey when they had lost hope before?
Recently, I started working with a client. I believe he's about 70, 72 or so, like ballroom dancing. And he came to me and just was like, I need to function again. I want to continue to dance. And I started working with him, and he's lost 20 pounds. But I think his biggest eye-opener was he was telling me that he was on this little vacation with a friend of his, and he saw directly his friend just unable to function, like unable to walk the distances that they were trying to walk and get to these different areas. And that inspired him to push through. What I'm doing is like working. And it's super cool to see that, just because I remember when I first started working with him, he could barely squat. And then now he's squatting with 15, 20 pounds in his hands and doing it in a way where it's like he never would have thought that he could do that. And that seems small to a lot of people, but like when you're like, you just don't think you can do this anymore. But then all of a sudden you come back, oh, this is kind of cool.
That makes me really happy to hear. Thanks for sharing that. And I feel like for caregivers, they have a lot of opportunity to be that source of empowerment and encouragement as well for family members who support their loved ones and caregivers. What are some tips you can give to them to help their loved ones explore these new fitness opportunities?
Do it with them.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Like, I love seeing couples, seniors, elderly, when they're walking outside with each other.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're there to support, you should be there to do it with them. Practice what you preach. I think doing it together, it just creates a stronger, more uniform mindset that, you can't break.
Yeah, I love that. But I really want to ask you about this mindset perspective, because certain patients of mine, and I'm sure you've had similar clients, will come to me and say, look, I just feel so much more limited now that I'm older. I can't move as much. I'm not as strong as before. And now I have to follow all these new rules of eating and moving and da-da-da. Is there a kind of perspective shift that you're able to help them realize, where you can say, yes, you're right, you do have more limitations, but here's the positive part about getting older?
When you're feeling overwhelmed and you're like, I can't do this anymore because it seems like just so incredibly restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
It's restrictive, but also it's a new challenge for yourself. And once you have recognize this is a challenge, but it's going to make my life more enjoyable. It's going to empower me more. Let's do it. We're not trying to live life day to day, just staying within our own comfort bubble. We need to challenge ourselves to live. And I think that's the thing. Even as we age, as we get older, we might be limited, but that doesn't limit us from actually living and challenge ourselves as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of a quote I heard a while ago. It's, choose your hard. There's two routes, and both routes are going to be hard at some point. You can choose your hard now and try to meet that new challenge of a new exercise fitness journey, or you can choose your hard later by not doing it, and then we have to deal with the consequences later. And so you kind of decide which hard you want to take right now.
Yeah, exactly.
The last question, and we just love to get to know the expert. What do you do to personally age well? Outside of your already very active fitness regimen and what you're already doing.
So this is a pretty deep one. I just love to be curious. What can I do for myself to make myself better? And I do things that I enjoy to have fun. I want to have fun doing whatever's going to make me better. And I think that's the thing. I used to be very stuck in here's my program. I need to go hard on this. I'm going to stick to reps and the percentage and whatever. And now it's more of just this doesn't feel great. I'm going to try changing this up and do this instead and see how this feels. And just be very curious on what can I do to maximize my potential. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is just having that mindset constantly. And it's the same thing with just how I live my life. I'm always going to be learning and changing.
Keep climbing those mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that mountain's never going to stop.
That's true. So many great pearls today, Matt. I think that the most important takeaways from this discussion is that there's really no one size fits all. It's all a personal journey. But if you follow certain principles, if you keep moving, if you can empower yourself to recognize that you can do this, keep it simple, focus on your metabolic health, maintain that good functional health. My hope is that our audience can take away snippets of what they heard from you today to really apply it to their own lives and apply it meaningfully.
I hope so.
Thank you again for being here, Matt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'll see you at the gym. So that's all for this episode. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more informed, inspired, and empowered. If you have a topic suggestion for a future episode, you can leave us a voicemail at 507-538-6272, and we might even feature your voice on the show. For more Aging Forward episodes and resources, head to mayoclinic.org/agingforward. And if you found this show helpful, please subscribe and make sure to rate and review us on your podcast app. It really helps others find our show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious and stay active.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as medical or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for any medical questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity does not constitute an endorsement of or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.